Boundaries. They're the invisible force that shapes everything from international conflicts to your morning commute. But what most people don't realize is that 85% of workplace conflicts stem from poorly defined boundaries.
That's fascinating data, and it really highlights why we need to understand how boundaries work in our daily lives. What exactly do we mean when we talk about boundaries?
Well, think of boundaries like the walls of a container. They hold everything together. There are three main types: time, territory, and task. And here's what's really interesting. In professional development settings, consultants sometimes enforce these boundaries in shocking ways.
Hmm, what do you mean by shocking?
So get this, they'll literally stand up and walk out mid-sentence when time's up. It seems incredibly rude, right? But it's actually a powerful teaching tool about respecting time boundaries.
That reminds me of how airports handle their time boundaries. Those doors close whether you're there or not.
Exactly. And you know what's fascinating? Studies show that organizations with clearly defined boundaries are 47% more likely to meet their project deadlines. But here's the real kicker. Territory boundaries can be even more complex than time boundaries.
Oh, like those classic office turf wars?
Right, but it goes way deeper than that. Think about how digital territories work now. Studies show that the average organization deals with 15 different types of territory conflicts daily, from project ownership to data management. Let me ask our listeners, what territory conflicts have you encountered in your workplace? Take a moment to think about it.
That's such an interesting way to frame it. And these boundaries often intersect with task boundaries too, don't they?
Exactly. And here's something mind-blowing. Research indicates that 73% of failed projects can be traced back to unclear task boundaries. Let's try another thought experiment. Think about your current main project. Can you clearly state its boundaries in terms of time, territory, and task? Take a moment.
That makes me think about how different organizations handle these boundaries, like how hospitals need rigid protocols, while creative agencies need more flexibility.
That's actually a perfect example. Studies show that organizations that match their boundary style to their function see a 32% increase in productivity. But here's what really blows my mind. The concept of boundaries as regions rather than hard lines.
Could you explain that a bit more?
Well, imagine a gradient instead of a line. Research shows that organizations that implement transition zones, like those 5-minute buffer periods between meetings, report 28% less stress among employees. It's like having an airlock between different environments.
That's such a powerful metaphor. So, what would you say are the key takeaways?
Three things. First, boundaries need to be clearly specified. Studies show this reduces conflict by 60%. Second, they must be agreed upon. This increases compliance by 45%. And finally, they need to be consistently enforced, which leads to a 38% improvement in project outcomes.
Those are some compelling statistics. Any final thoughts as we wrap up?
You know, the most fascinating thing about boundaries is that they're not barriers. They're enablers. When properly designed, they create what psychologists call psychological safety zones, where real work can happen. So next time you encounter a boundary, remember, it's not there to limit you, it's there to empower you. Until next time, keep exploring those boundaries.